Boss battles definitely vary in scale, and stories stay by quite a bit, regardless of the genre of game you might be playing. Usually the life of your character might be in danger, so of course you'd want to win, right? Sure, yeah, but sometimes they manage to push it further than that, to a point you don't just want to win, but you want to win because you're attached to your character, or the cast. A game like Xenoblade Chronicles 1 does a lot to really make you, feel attached to the characters within the opening hours of it, so whenever this entire cutscene starts rolling around, and you already know what's probably about to happen, if you're watching a friend play through the game, this might be the point where they start to care a bit more about what's going on. I know I certainly did. Mainly because, that good line you get from Shulk afterwards. Horror games, survival horror especially, are pretty damn good at this. And that's usually because of a character like Chris, Jill, Leon, or even Shuri, who you've had time to see grow and mature through these situations, you'll usually be rooting for. Not just because you don't want to die and have to start back over, or you might be a little bit squeamish, but it could also just be because of the kinds of character they are, and what they might be trying to accomplish, or how they carry themselves. A scene like this, you can catch me rooting for Claire after that. And when I was playing through Revelations 2, because Various with Natalia, a defenseless little girl with the throwing rubber Adonis Chapman, at no point during my playthrough did I want to die. Because the thought of her watching the many horrible ways you could die in the game occur to Barry, leaving her in a potentially very bad situation and more than likely be next. I kind of went, well, we can't have that happening. When a game is willing to, put me in the seat of the character and make me kind of feel like I'm them, that's in a state of complete happiness while experiencing the story. I'm willing to suspend my disbelief as far as the role the game itself takes place in when viewing a cutscene or dealing with a quick-time event that I as an individual might not be able to replicate, but makes me want to feel like that character in the game. Just like at Kingdom Hearts 2, for example. The reaction commands in that game, they go pretty hard, so when you get them off, it feels nice. And in DMC 4, you might see Nero kicking demons and Exceed skating around on them. You can't do that in gameplay. I certainly wish you could, but it just makes you want to feel like that character. It makes you want to pull stuff off in those games. And Hi-Fi Rush does a really good job of that too. When I was playing through Hi-Fi Rush, because of the kind of character Chai is, I never really felt like I was doing anything out of character. Even if I got hit, it still felt like I was the character. And that's a really cool thing to have happen. Like this.
Previously on Hi-Fi Rush.
How about...
I've been looking for you.
Holy crap!
Now, stuff like this is something I think is super neat because you're in a place where it doesn't feel out of character for something like this to happen. I absolutely adore the Devil May Cry series, and whenever I'm playing and I feel like I'm in the position of Dante, cutting through demons left and right, just making an absolute fool of them, and I get hit with that little thing that makes me go from, an S straight down to having no style ranking, it can make me feel like I'm no longer the character. But then some stuff like this happens, and suddenly Rule of Cool takes over. I mean, so many parts of this game, they just feel right to me. Whenever you're fighting Verge, when you pop your Devil Trigger, you can just, super armor through so many hits and do cool stuff like this. There's no reason for me to de-transform here, aside from, saving Devil Trigger, but I've only got, a bar over him. We deflect these swords off each other, taunt, then get right back to fighting. Something like that just feels extremely cinematic to me, and that's cool. And normally I hate this kind of thing because it brings up a word I really don't like, and that word is immersion. A good majority of the time I see people talk about immersion, it's not really anything to do with feeling immersed in the game because they never really lose themselves in the gameplay. It always has to deal with, I don't know, trying to make things as realistic as possible rather than trying to fit into that world and truly feeling immersed in it. In a game like Breath of the Wild, you can feel immersed, but whenever game articles are talking about stuff like not grabbing the paraglider to make the game feel more immersive, the paraglider is something Link by all means should grab. It's an item, he knows about, something he has had before. Why would he not get something like that while exploring the sky? That doesn't seem like a very immersive thing, at least from my point of view. There are times that I'm playing a game and I can choose not to use a mechanic because, well, it just might feel cheesy or not right in the context. But that's a personal choice to make. It's not like I'm going to sit there and ignore the stuff happening in the game world and then blame the game for, breaking my immersion whenever it presents something that goes against my self-crafted narrative of it. Which, when you can form a narrative about a game and what your experience is going through that, that's also a really cool thing. But what's not cool and actually super irritates me is whenever somebody claims to be immersed in a game, but they, again, aren't losing themselves in the system, so they aren't putting themselves in the position of the character and thinking, what would they do in that? Because I read a discussion, it's probably going to show up in the video if it hasn't already, where some person completely ignored the fact that Mipha tells you that you can control the Divine Beast through the Sheikah Slate, and they said the game never told them, but it's a voiced line and then you get another notification for it. It feels like one of those things where, like, if you were truly immersed and feeling like that character, you would be making use of that thing before you need it to. Because if Link's gonna get around Hyrule without his map, I don't know. You could totally do that, but if he knows that that's how he gets his map, and he knows the Sheikah Slate is there, and that's how he uses it, why would he not? There's not a gameplay perspective where I could look at it and go, that seems like something he would do. And it's easy to, like, build up immersion in games for me, because whenever I think about something like this cutscene, I'm kind of feeling the same thing Shoka's feeling. I'm feeling hyped up that I finally get to fight this guy. I know I'm not going to win because, you know, past experience, but
I'll kill you!
is a voice line that always gets me hyped up. And whenever you can take the time to lose a battle in a game, and it still continues on, that's something that really gets me hooked, because, well, next time I see that enemy, if I ever see them again, I'm probably going to want to get revenge on them. Kingdom Hearts 1 does a really good job of this, because here's some context for the situation. Sora rafts out to the Destiny Islands on an empty stomach, skips dinner, all that. He fights the dark side, and this is a battle he has to win, mind you, so there's no other choice, but he fights the dark side in a game of, you know, tennis, if you choose to, and then, you know, gets woken up, probably a little bit concussed and all that fun stuff on the, you know, streets of Traverse Town, spends some more time fighting some Heartless, and, you know, when he runs into those little dudes, homie's probably tired. He's been fighting for a while, he hasn't had anything to eat, and when you run into Leon and you can lose, that feels like something good to me.
But why?
Because even though your HP bar might be full, I can fully believe that Sora might be exhausted. So when he ends up in the situation and he, you know, possibly wins, he could be running off of pure adrenaline at this point, like finally winding down. Or, in the case you lose, he was way too exhausted to keep putting up any more of a fight. And it's a really good thing that he lost to somebody who, I don't know, wasn't too bad of a person, but all in all, it's a really good feeling. Because while it might not affect your first playthrough beyond, like, you know, bragging rights rewards, it's definitely something that you'll look at on a past one and go, I might want to get that XP from that. But when we drift into Kingdom Hearts 2, you're put into the shoes of Roxas, a young boy who's kind of a nobody, but he's got 3 really spectacular friends. Their names are Hainer, Pence, and Olette. Minorly important for him, but they're kind of like his own version of, I don't know, Tidus, Waka, and Selphie. They don't really do much bearing towards the plot, but they're still clearly important people, more so important than, you know, those 3 words Sora. But it's a really nice change. And Roxas even has his own little version of I don't know, Squall, Leon, whatever you want to call him that day of the week. And that's Cypher, who, coincidentally, is also prone to, like, picking fights with kids in the street, which seems to be kind of weird, but
Neo, loser!
this beginning battle, Cypher has beaten Roxas before, so if by chance you happen to lose in that fight, it's not something I would consider immersion breaking, because it's been shown that Roxas can be beat by him. Hopefully you'll win said fight, because unless you're playing on critical, there's not too much to worry about, because, you know, the damage and health changes and all that fun stuff. But it's one of those weird things of, man, you don't want to lose, but it would be completely reasonable for you to lose. And continuing further, the Dusk fight, which is a fight Roxas can't exactly afford to lose, because if he does, well, that's just in the line for him, takes place after Roxas chases this thing all the way through the woods after getting out of a street brawl, beats it to a pulp, and he isn't winded whatsoever. So, kids got some limits. So later, whenever you end up, you know, fighting against Vivi in the Storybook tournament, and basically immediately go into fighting these 3 goons, Roxas has a limit of 3 before he starts getting winded. showing that your character has a limit can be kind of important, because otherwise, you don't really have any indication of what they can and can't take on. And let me tell you, knowing what I can take on, either through gameplay or, you know, story reasons, helps me build that kind of narrative for what I'm going through. So, whenever I know Roxas can take on 3 of these, and I start playing as Sora, and I'm tasked with, you know, beating all these goons up, even though Sora's been through a past adventure, he's just waking up at this point. He doesn't have his entire kit, or, you know, even his magic at this point. He's clearly, you know, kind of still lagging. And even though I really don't like this part because, I don't know, the thought of just getting overwhelmed by him rather than having any kind of clear win goal, it just kind of feels off to me, because we know Sora can do more. We just know that he's tired, so this is kind of like an unfair setup for him. And even though I know that they probably only backed off because Mickey popped up, it still kind of feels weird that that was her karma for the back off. Considering the nobodies have been shown to be more intelligent than Heartless at this point, I don't know, it kind of would have felt better if you could get through all of them, and then Sora, Donald, and Goofy would kind of, you know, do a little cheering thing, be happy that they still had their groove, only to, you know, have the nobody kind of pop up and try to take all the sneak attack, which, like I just showed on screen a little while ago, it's kind of a phenomenon called the Warp Effect, which is, it's meant to show how strong in comparison these new enemies are. Because aside from the beginning segment of Kingdom Hearts 1, and, you know, losing the Sabor, we never really see Sora in a condition of him being tired in Kingdom Hearts 1 again after that. Or at least I don't think so. And again, if they had shown the stealthy enemy being stealthy and using that to get one over on our, you know, lovable but gullible heroes, it really would have set the tone as, these things are dangerous, but not for the same reasons as the other ones. They can think. There's something more human about them, one way or another. And that could have been really cool. I'm not the story writer, so, you know, none of what I think really matters. But just seeing Sora and Co. looking confused at, you know, what these dudes are before they jump into the fight, they can tell they're hostile, so they know they're about the box. But if they've been shown to be dangerous for other reasons than just being mindless and wild, it'd have been pretty cool. Now, on the topic of battles you can lose, we've got DMC3. Now, for story reasons, it would make sense to be able to lose this fight. Dante loses anyway, right? But it would, you know, kind of break the story. Because Dante winning here doesn't mean that Dante wins. It just means Dante doesn't die during the fight. He puts up enough of a fight against Virgil that the fight concludes with him getting a sword shoved through his chest. If, for some reason, Dante were to go down before any other point in the fight, it wouldn't result in that, because he hasn't pushed himself, and he hasn't shown Virgil that there's more to him. So, whenever you beat Virgil and you still, quotation marks, lose, in quotation marks, it feels right, because you know Dante's not as strong yet. If Dante were able to lose this fight, it wouldn't be a good thing. So, having to win a fight that you still lose anyways is normally a really big issue in games for me. It's not something I like, because it doesn't feel like anything has weight. Because why win if you're just going to lose in the first place? In this case, it's to show that Dante does have the potential, that he is a son of Sparta, not, you know, just there. And that's actually really cool to me. So, having these cinematic fights with Virgil, it just feels right that whenever I do manage to beat him, if the fight was anything like what's going on, then I might be at low health. I probably won't be at full health because, you know, I can't Royal Guard everything. I'm not that good. But whenever I'm at low health and I go into the cutscene and my character is shown to, you know, be in bad condition because the fight was tough, that's something that really feels like it's feeding into my immersion, and that's super cool. And I know I've said that like twice now, but again, it's so damn cool because it makes me feel like I'm actually in that situation. I might not be fighting Virgil, but seeing my character at low health whenever I go in that cutscene, it really makes me feel like I didn't just, you know, nuke the boss and then go straight into a cutscene where I'm suddenly super weak, because I know that fight beforehand was hard. It makes things feel like they have, you know, scale and stake to them, Because the battle's hard and it's shown to be hard in the cutscene, that feels right. It probably won't be if you're playing on like the same difficulty and repeat playthroughs, but for that first time, it's gonna feel like something special. There are lots of different ways to portray boss battles in games, from time stages to, I don't know, something as simple as a bullet hell. That might just be a character-specific thing. There's a game called Dark Cloud on the PS2. It's got its duels. These are kind of like quick-time event sections that show if Tone, or rather, imply that if Tone didn't do exactly what he did, he wouldn't have survived that encounter. And while you might not get to fight that enemy directly or get to do anything cool like in the game itself, which can make it feel like it's, you know, immersion breaking for the fact that you can't do any of that. You can't jump in this game, you can't do a lot of the things that it's shown that he can do in these duels and other quick time events. And RPGs kind of suffer the same problem. A game like Shin Megami Tensei 5 shows off the Nahobino doing a lot of cool stuff in its attacks. It really shows off just how strong he is in that sense. So when you're in a cutscene and he's shown to, you know, be doing a lot less, mostly just reactionary and everything, it's because the game doesn't really know how to account for the kinds of skills that you might have in your, you know, set. You might not have any physical moves, but if you've been using those skills like Armas and Wrath Tempest the game gives you with the Aogami sets, it can really make you feel like you're doing something awesome if you're sticking to, you know, what the character would theoretically have. While turn-based games might not be the most flashy as far as input goes, they can still make you think about what you're doing, because if they've introduced a small change like, I don't know, attacking enemy during a certain phase, causing a counterattack, or forcing you to guard to avoid being instantly killed, then I feel like the game is doing a really good job of still keeping you, you know, from mindlessly going through your menus and just hitting them with the strongest thing you have available. And there are often times where this might not be a good idea, the keeping the strongest things available to you equipped at all times thing, I mean. Margaret in Persona 4, if you try to like flex an immunity on her or you don't inflict enough damage within a certain time period, she just straight up murders you, no questions asked. She'll drop a Mega Delone on your head, and that does 9,999 damage. Also known as more HP than you will have at max level. You can withstand it, mind you, like is shown here. But the thing is, she'll keep dropping that until you're dead. Odds are you aren't going to get through that with her, you know, nuking you every single turn. These fights use it on varying mechanics, so they have to rely more on the narrative weight of the situation more so than any gameplay that would be changed. And I'm stating this again mainly for turn-based games. I'll follow up on this later. There's another series I'd like to talk about for a little bit, and they're more on the tactical side. The series are Fire Emblem and XCOM, and how similar but different they are. Fire Emblem has bosses and is a turn-based strategy game, but these bosses usually function like normal enemies, but have higher stats. And possibly a skill that makes them dangerous to run into without thinking. And sometimes even move around the map instead of sitting on a special tile waiting for you to approach them. Aside from these different skills, weapons, or otherwise, they're identical in every way to normal enemies, except for one thing. A normal unit that has no connection to the might get put the "Bastards one and all, you'll all fall here," while the character introduced on the map, or that has a personal connection to that character, might get some line aimed at them. There's really any benefit to doing this aside from a cool moment. But why shouldn't you want those cool moments? They feel really good to have happen. I mean, look at this. It's not much, but...
Pathetic worm. You are not listening.
And you're not mine. Vale is. Give her back.
I am Vale. And I'll prove it, here and now, by destroying you.
Pardon the XP, there's no real benefit to having a leader take out Vale. It's just cool for story reasons, and more stuff that's cool for story reasons. In Fire Emblem Awakening, there's a young boy named Donald. And on his introduction map, my goal is to always have Donald take out the bandit leader that's holding his mother and others hostage. It's cool to see this country bumpkin from Nowheresville with a pot on his head hillbilly pick up a spear and go to save those close to him against all odds. In addition to that, it's also possibly tragic if he dies attempting this. He didn't have to die. He tries to do what he could and only ends up causing mother grief for trying to save her at Crom's suggestion. If you don't level him up, Donald stays behind anyways, but if you do level him, he's got the aptitude skill that'll allow him to soar to unbelievable heights and become an absolute monster in the right hands. Maybe Crom's dad had the right idea about skin-shifting farmers to fight wars. But initially, Donald can't die during that chapter. That'd be a little bit too depressing because of that. Imagine having to tell someone's mother, "Hey, I got your son killed," by telling him to fight, and, you know, having history get robbed like that. XCOM 2 has a lot of enemies that could be considered bosses by far than standards. They don't really have anything aside from weird skills going for them. You get enemies like the Vipers and Lancers that, instead of just shooting you from afar, will do something to force a positional change. These are things I could consider bosses by this game's standards too, because of those abilities. It's not enough to like force an entire change to your strategy or make you reevaluate what you're doing, since you can usually, take them out on the first turn. But it is enough to make you think about what you're doing and how to change the situation. Because Vipers, if you get your units bunched up, they'll spit into that crowd and poison everyone, severely hampering their abilities. It'll make it harder to aim, harder to move, all that fun stuff, and it'll leave you a sitting duck for a lot of enemies. The Stun Lancers, they've got the potential to knock one of your units unconscious by, hitting them. I don't mean killing them, they just straight up take them out of the equation. It's near an insta-kill, and there are things you can get to avoid this, but again, these are things you have to watch out for in the game unless, you want to die. Now, you might be wondering why I'm showing XCOM footage with Final Fantasy VII characters here. Well, it's because I didn't give enough time to that segment earlier, but also because aside from, whenever you discover new enemy types and Tigan gives you a small, diagnosis on what they can do and stuff like that, there isn't much for the narrative outside of, like, the big story events that happen, so the characters between these moments don't really matter. So it's kind of up to the player to, form that story through the gameplay. It's a self-creating narrative. And honestly, if you want to have some fun, if you decide to play through XCOM 2, it's always a little fun to try to make an entire cast of, familiar characters. Because the ones you do make, while they won't have anything special to them as far as, like, narrative standpoints go, it can still be fun playing through the game and having things happen. You could have a rookie who ended up being the last survivor of his squad, who went on to become, the de facto leader of a different squad. Because they survived and they had the experience over them, they guided them to victory time and time again. It's not much, but those self-created narratives and stuff like that, it helps you form a relationship to the enemies that you're fighting, as well as the characters that you're playing with. And I think that's cool. At least until War of the Chosen came out, at least. Because in War of the Chosen, you're introduced to a few new characters, of which have actual names.
You are too trusting, John. The skirmishers are Advent. Advent is the enemy. The enemy is food.
Try not to bring that up when we meet, Volk.
Now, going into the next cutscene, we're gonna meet one of those named characters soon enough. And the thing is, being a named character in XCOM doesn't really mean a lot. Because of the fact that all your characters are, able to be changed into anyone or anything within reason or whatever mods you have installed. So, when we're finally introduced to this character, Elena Dragunova, the thing is, even though she has some story events and stuff like this, after this event, her life means about as much as any other grunt that joins XCOM. You could have her killed, you could choose not to use her, it's all up to you. But the thing is, during this mission, you need her. She's supposed to see it through the end, and that's because of the cutscenes that'll come after, with another character who you'll soon be introduced to, our good buddy Mox. Now, he faces the same issues as Elena in the fact, well, I said that differently twice now. Anyways, he faces the same issues as her in that, after this mission, he's not really important to the story anymore. He could be swapped out with literally anyone. But the thing is, for both Elena and for Mox, they are still considered a Reaper and a Skirmisher. And why is this important? And why does this matter in this video about boss battles? Well, not just about boss battles, but for individual immersion. It's because we're going to be talking about the bosses related to these new factions. The Chosen.
Heard you punks were looking for me. Didn't want to keep you waiting.
Rendezvous point directly ahead. Let's try and play nice today, people.
So, Advent's most brutal captain comes to atone for his crimes.
I am no longer that being. I am free now.
Taking off that helmet does not change what you are. Reapers have long memories. Elder Cruxard. Anytime.
The way I see it, we have two options. Join forces and kick the Elders off our world, or kill each other here and now. The choice is yours.
you'll ever do that again.
What the hell is that?
Good question, Bradford. As I just said, that's one of the Chosen. The Chosen Assassin, to be specific. And as far as the Chosen go, she's the one I consider the worst to deal with. Especially if you're in a, sort of actual combat situation, because unlike the Hunter and unlike the Warlock, she will go full aggro on you. She won't sit there taking pot shots at them. She'll run up, definitely hit them, and if you try to close in on her, if you run around a corner and you don't know she's there, well, you're getting uppercut by her, and that's to knock soldier straight into the ground, and they're going to be stunned for a turn. And if they're too far from anyone else when they get stunned, she can just straight up abduct them. You won't be seeing her doing this gameplay I'm showing right now because she won't be around long enough for that. Considering this battle, she leaves around half health, so she can abduct Mox during the next cutscene that I'll be playing, which I feel is a bit of cool, gameplay and story integration. The thing is, when this starts happening to your soldiers on normal missions, it's definitely going to make you start, resenting them a lot more because of the fact that they aren't really killing your soldiers. In fact, I'm relatively sure that if they do kill shot any of your soldiers, they're simply left to bleed out on the ground. But that's where the issue arises. They kidnap them, which prevents you from using them, kind of like them getting injured in the first place, but now they're draining knowledge from them, which is another resource that the Chosen use to, build and level up, and get more abilities that can sabotage your ship at their disposal. So yeah, props to her for pulling the classic, I cannot fall here, and, splitting long enough to do something like this to you.
I had not expected this conflict to be so exhilarating. You surprise me, XCOM. Still, the Elder's will is that none survive this day. I cannot leave that to fortune.
The sonic dispersal waves emitting from that pod are crisscrossing a massive area.
Meaning that thing just rang the dinner bell for every remaining Lost in the city.
An accurate assessment. The entire Lost biomass seems to be converging on this position. Then let's get you all the hell out of there. Firebrand's en route to the evac coordinates now. Get moving.
Now, if the reason I brought this up alongside Fire Emblem isn't quite yet obvious, it's because, like in Fire Emblem, whenever you have a boss that has a relation to a certain character, XCOM kind of has the same thing going for it with this. If you go on the mission to rescue Mox from, the site it's been kept at, with Elena, there's not really a reward for it. Nothing really gets brought up or nothing really gets said. But it still feels cool to do because of this mission. You can see that there's some kind of budding relationship between them and all that fun stuff. Friend, ally, all that good. But the thing is, if she goes to save him, it shows that, hey, she was still looking out for him after that. Had a debt to repay and all that. Or rather, a debt to put Mox further into because she had saved him twice so far. It's not a lot, but it does a lot for the storytelling of the situation. And that's pretty cool. And whenever you go up against the different Chosen with, any of the faction heroes, they always have things to say about them. From the Hunter talking to the Reapers to, the Templars getting chastised by the Warlock for their misuse of the Elder's power and all that fun stuff. It's really neat, and it gives me a reason to want to have those interactions between them. It gives me a reason to want to use these characters whenever I'm going through these types of things. Additional bonus points for them having an interaction with Jane Kelly. She's a canon character who gets brought up in the beginning cutscenes of XCOM 2, and if you have around for this type of stuff, it's really neat because you can have her work with the Templars, Skirmishers, and Reapers as kind of the faction leader representative of XCOM, and I think that's really neat, especially if you decide to go up against, the final map with a squad of 4 consisting of them. It might not be the easiest thing to do, but goddamn if it isn't cool to have the 4 leading forces on Earth fighting for good together, storming the Elder's headquarters and absolutely laying waste to everything they can throw at them. right next to the commander, the person unifying them all. And that's fucking cool as hell. The last part of this video I'm going to be talking about tonight is boss battles that cause a change in gameplay style. Like Corsica and Hi-Fi Rush. You know she's a good person, or, you know, they've got the suspicion that she is, and she's able to be reasoned with. The issue is, the person in charge of reasoning with her isn't the, most adept at that kind of thing. He's good at fighting, but, you know, when you kind of want to bring someone in alive, maybe beating them to death with a guitar isn't the best idea. So instead, he opts to do something else. He tires her out. Chai, being the lovable goofball he is, kind of approaches the situation from an odd spot. He's got the right idea to start, but, you know, eventually he starts happening.
She's still looking at Spectra files.
Okay, that's good. She wants to know more. She'll listen to us.
I'm like a chameleon. Mr. Chai, are you listening? Waiting to strike.
Now this is important. All you need is to subtly...
Not really the best start he could have asked for with the situation, but, you know.
This isn't what it looks like.
Enough!
Now, excuse my gameplay in the coming seconds, because it took me a second to get back in the flow of this. But, effectively, the gameplay doesn't really change. It still requires you to play, you know, a rhythm game. The thing is, you're no longer on the offensive, you're purely only defensive and evasive. Chai tries to negotiate with her, all that fun stuff, talk her down, but while he can't really, you know, take the time to knock her out, he's more so going to take the time to whittle down her strength, which eventually devolves into him getting her to go all out, and, well, it's less intentional, but, you know. As the boss battle continues, it eventually begins to ramp up the difficulty by introducing, you know, dodging to the mix, as well as longer, continuous combo strings. All things that you've probably been dealing with as the games continue, just in a different way. Instead of executing these quotation marks attacks in quotation marks, like you normally would by using the X or Y buttons to, you know, do everything, the game is now also asking you to perform those in a sort of combo sequence. It's a good way to, like, I don't know, capstone the previous battles you've had like this, that Chai would finish off the enemy at the end of, you know, pairing all their strikes. But now he doesn't act on that. Instead, he waits. He does it again, and eventually Corsica tires herself out.
You got this, Chai. You think you can strong-arm me? Hey, you chose to fight. Wait, you like puns too? What? No. Whatever. Let's see how you handle this. What the? Caught you off guard.
Okay, scratch parrying everything.
So the game introduces you to the fact that she's going to be throwing in a new attack by demonstrating a cutscene first. If you try to parry just like Chai, you will get blown away. It's a good thing, because it makes you feel like the events taking place in these cutscenes aren't just there for the cutscenes, if you get that. It makes them feel like you're still in that game's world, and like I was saying earlier about, you know, boss battles, gameplay, and just general immersion, that's a solid thing to have going for your game. And they really knocked it out of the park with this. So, if you enjoyed that or resonated with at least one part of the message I was saying, I'd appreciate if you let me know down below. Or had your own examples or something. I plan on making more videos about different boss battles and how some of them work really well, like, or rather, are well implemented between, you know, multiple gameplay styles despite being in one series of game. Like, you know, the final boss battle of Sonic and Knuckles and Sonic Adventure to say the least. I think that's going to be the next one I'm covering. I've already got part of that recorded, if I recall, but I'll probably get on that sometime around, like, later this week, Tuesday, Wednesday, whenever I figure out what I'm doing. But until then, hopefully I'll see you next time. Until then, adios.
Mission report. Just go up.
Up?
Up.
That's it?
Looks like Corsica's in her office and